Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman, and I'm joined by my partner in this crime, one Tyrone, the porcupine hobo. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I feel like I'm ready for this. What they call adult education, continued learning stuff. So
Is that what we're doing?
I don't know.
We
Maybe.
should figure out a way to get a federal grant or something.
Hey, there. Now you're thinking. The next lockdown. Let's just apply for those loans, baby.
So, what we are alluding to is we're continuing on our coverage of this here fine book, Economics in One, Two, Three Lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And is this our third?
Third episode. Yep.
Third
In the
episode, yeah,
series.
part
Yep.
two, section two. So, yeah, we're going to cover chapters 4, 5, and 6 today and talk about economics, the lessons therein, and why they're important, and what we should all think about that sort of stuff. You ready, man?
Yeah. Let's do it. All right. So we'll begin reading chapter 4. Called The Role of Profits in Driving Down Prices. Who knew that profits can actually decrease prices?
Wait a minute. But profits are the thing you stack on top of the cost of production that goes
Yeah.
to that greedy capitalist. How
Yeah,
can this be, Tyrone? How
those
can this
greedy
be?
capitalists, man. I don't know. All right, here we go. Profits are an integral part of any free price system. If people are free to set the prices for what they are selling, they will naturally try to set the price high enough to earn a profit. This actually works to everyone's, not just the seller's advantage. Some people believe that a profit margin, what the producer earns over and above cost, makes goods or services more expensive. Philosopher Ted Hondrich expresses this viewpoint. If there are two ways of producing some valuable thing, and the second way involves not only the costs of producing it, but also unnecessary profits of millions or billions of dollars or pounds, then the second way is patently and tremendously less efficient. Interesting. Kind of attacking profit system from an efficiency standpoint, not a moralistic one, an efficiency standpoint. So, okay. All right. Well, Hondrich could not be more wrong, says the author here. Imagine that my tomato sauce business, earlier in this chapter, is earning a very fat profit. This guy must have really liked tomato sauce, is all I can
Yeah,
think
it's a
of.
strange
It's so
good to
weird.
be
Like, why
concerned
that
about.
of all things?
I mean, I
Uh,
like tomato sauce, but I
yeah,
wouldn't have picked it.
right, right. All right. Um, and my tomato sauce business is earning a very fat profit. Most likely, I will take those profits and use them to increase production. I will I will want to increase production in order to earn even more fat profits. Other tomato sauce producers will likely do the same, and some companies not presently making tomato sauce may also be lured into the business by the high profit margin. As a direct result, the supply of tomato sauce will most likely rise, the price will fall because of the expanded supply, and profit margins will then shrink. If profit margins shrink too much, supply may fall too far, and prices rise again. Throughout this trial and error process, consumers are signaling how much tomato sauce of what kind they want. Prices and profits relay their decisions. The chief point to take away from all this is that the quest for profits in a competitive market, I want to emphasize that word, competitive market, increases supply. Increased supply in turn lowers, not raises prices. If profit is eliminated, prices will tend to rise, not fall. Let me repeat that. If profit is eliminated, prices tend to rise, not fall. This is exactly what happened in France when government restricted the price of bread in order to make it more affordable. The result was that bread became much more expensive if it could be found at all. Let's pause there, Adam. There's so many good just takeaway lessons in that first page.
Yeah, prices are just magical, or they seemingly magical. And it's not just that profits in an industry attract more entrants and increase competition, which drives up supply, which lowers price. There's also another way for these greedy capitalists to increase their profits, which is to use their entrepreneurial vision and human ingenuity to lower the cost of production. That also increases their profits and causes, in a competitive market, their competition to do likewise, and so you end up with this discovery process by which highly motivated humans are trying to solve problems of economic efficiency and production for other humans as consumption, and it all uses the beauty of the price system and these free markets. And so for some fat lazy English twit, I assume that's who Hundrich is, they'll just come along and say, yeah, profit makes things inefficient. I doubt he demonstrated that claim in the book or essay that was being quoted there. And it's just complete and utter nonsense. You need the profit system to align the incentives of all producers to make the miracle of the free market and its high volume of goods and low relative cost of those goods for it to function. And without that, go visit the Soviet Union. Via a history book, and you'll see what you have when you don't have a profit system.
Or visit North Korea today.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to go back and reemphasize the word competitive. So in that's a very key point, right? So we're talking about in this theoretical free market system. Now, we don't have such a thing in place, so we have to do our best to take the real world empirical examples and sort of extrapolate that theoretically wise and say, okay, this is kind of how the mechanisms work. And so I want to make sure that people understand that, I think there is an instinct among people that just something isn't right in our society. Something isn't fair. Like these pharmaceutical companies or big banks or whatever it is are making these billions of dollars of profits, and it just seems like it's not right. It doesn't seem like the wealth is being spread around. The gap is getting bigger, and so then they automatically say, well, then big business is bad, capitalism is bad, whatever you want to say, right? But we don't live in a competitive market. I mean, those two things that I just mentioned, among pick whatever else you want, are two of the most highly regulated, capped industries. Like, you can't just go open a bank. You can't just go buy a building, put a sign on the sale, say Tyrone's Bank now open for business. You can't do that, right? I can't. So you got to have all these licenses and regulations. So it's not competitive at all. So I think the next time you're in an, not even in an argument, because I don't get in arguments anymore. There's no point. But I do like to have these sort of quippy little line comebacks, so that when someone says, "Man, profits are evil," we should go to a socialism, communism type system. Here's a great line just to have memorized at your ready. That line that says, "If profit is eliminated, prices will tend to rise, not fall." I mean, just say that. Just have that. You can say, "Oh, yeah, I get your instinct. That sounds good." But you know what? In a world without prices or profits, prices actually tend to go up. It just kind of, leave it kind of neutral like that, and let that sink in and hit their brain, and then think, wait, what? What are you talking about? That's not the instinct I have, right? And then you can say, oh, well, I got this book here.
Yeah.
Watch my podcast.
You're absolutely right. And just to linger on the point, I mean, if profits remain high in an industry, if prices just seem like they're too high, look around and I bet you'll find some weird government intervention that creates a bottleneck in that industry. Like, the rate per hand to play poker in Las Vegas just keeps going up. And I'm not allowed to just open up my garage and put a poker table in there and
Right.
charge people a lower rate and attract business my way. I'm prevented by law from doing that. That is a restriction in this market that keeps prices and profits artificially high.
Yep.
It is conceivable in a free market that profits will remain high. But if you see that, it's because the the people that are blazing the trail in that industry just keep innovating so fast that even new entrants, can't keep up. But that's a good thing. That
Right.
means we're getting more and more goods that obviously, because there are profits, consumers want. That's an expanding of our production process. And not just in quantity, but like in brand new things. I mean, what in the world is Chat GPT and Grok? But it's this brand new thing. So it's in areas like that that you'll see profits remain high and more entrants into the industry remain high with absent a government intervention. But if that's not the case and you see profits remaining high, just like the pharmaceutical industry, just look how crony that thing is. That's the problem there, not the capitalist part. It's the government part.
Yeah, remember, patents, monopolies,
Yep.
these are all government regulations preventing competition. So, all right, just one of many things: licensing, as you mentioned, taxation, the burden of regulation, like all the audit and reporting you have to do. I mean, these things make it impossible to compete if you're
Just
just
think about,
a newcomer.
just wrap your brain around this. In almost every state, not everyone, but the majority, you need to ask all the other hospitals in the area if you want to open up a new hospital. You have to get their literal permission. It's insane. Do you think people want competition
Right,
to arise,
exactly.
regardless of what the people
Right.
in the area want?
Right.
It's absolutely preposterous, and this is just sensible government regulation. What do you want? Chaos and anarchy?
Right.
The game is crooked.
All right. So our author continues on. And again, just want to mention this is by Hunter Lewis, Economics in 3 Lessons. And we're on chapter 4. He continues, the quest for profits also drives businesses to try to lower their costs. What? The prices they pay. The best way to lower business costs is to invest profits in equipment, facilities, or worker training. Businesses that fail to invest in order to lower their costs will soon find themselves losing out to competitors. If a business succeeds in reducing its costs, this may increase profits, but usually not for long. Studies consistently show that over time, the money saved by becoming more productive is used to increase worker pay or reduce consumer prices. Why? Because businesses have to compete for workers and customers and will lose them if they do not keep wages going up and consumer prices going down. I mean, those 2 paragraphs alone are worth the price of this book. I mean, that's just...
It's so true. And I'm sorry to cut you off, man,
Yeah,
but like I was just saying, that the discovery process and entrepreneurship keeps lowering the cost of production in a free market. Look at areas where that's not how things work. Look at highly regulated public utility companies or weapons contractors whose only client is the government. I mean, I think this is still the case, but for decades it was the case that the way these people got paid is on a cost plus a reasonable percentage profit basis, which means the incentive is for these companies to increase their costs, not lower them, because that increases their profit. Right. It's an absolute bastardization inversion of the proper signals sent by a free market price system. And, you wonder why things cost so much when the government buys them or when the government regulates them so heavily. That's why.
Yeah. All right. It is not necessary for workers even to be in short supply for this effect to be felt. No business can succeed if a competitor attracts away the best workers, and even one competitor is enough to take away customers with lower prices. Since workers are also consumers, rising wages with falling consumer prices is a formula for helping the average person. If profits are not just temporarily high in an industry but seem to be stuck for a long time at a high plateau, and no one seems to be manipulating or controlling prices by creating a monopoly with the backing of powerful government officials, it tells us that there is some economic problem to be overcome, some bottleneck interfering with commerce. High profits, then, signal opportunity for the entrepreneur who can overcome the bottleneck. For example, wheat was historically very difficult to get from farmer to market without spoiling or being eaten by rats. which enabled the hauler to charge high prices and earn a large profit. This eventually led entrepreneurs to invest in rat-proof containers and also in better transportation. The price of fish also fell dramatically as entrepreneurs invested in better ships and then refrigerated ships, thereby cutting out many middle merchants and seaports. From a free price system perspective, the temporarily high profit margins did their work. They attracted ingenuity and capital, and the combination helped solve an economic problem. Even Karl Marx, of all people, agreed that the profit system reduces prices, although he still wished to abolish it. He stated in the Communist Manifesto of 1848, quote, "The cheap prices of its commodities are the heavy artillery with which the profit system compels all nations on pain of extinction to adopt the profit mode of production," unquote. And that is the end of chapter 4. Your final thoughts on that section?
You know, I'm starting to get the sense that there was really something wrong with that Karl Marx guy. Low prices, horrible. We can't have that.
Yeah, it's really just this utopian ideology. I think, you know, this idea that man's spirit, whatever you want to call that, can rise to a higher plane or something like that. It's just, you know, and for those of us that live in the real world, we're just like, look, dude, we say it over and over again. There's no solutions. There's only trade-offs.
And look at the wickedness of a guy like Marx's perspective. He's decrying the thing that makes life possible for so many people. You know, the bread and the rats and the shipping, you know, that demonstrates it. Look how great it is that someone can come along and solve a problem, making things cheaper and more abundant for others and earn a profit, you know, doing so. That's amazing. In the modern age, you've seen those shipping containers that get stacked on the ships, and they're just so plug and play interchangeable when you get to the ports. That was just such a child could have figured it out with a set of Legos, but the guy who invented that, I mean, he's lowered so many costs for so many billions of people around this planet. And it's just beautiful that a free market system allows that ingenuity to be put in the service of helping the masses. And if you're some kind of Marxist, you don't like that? What's wrong with you, man?
I really think it's about materialism, right? I really feel like it's this weird moral philosophy that wants to divorce the mind from the body, or the soul from the body, that this transcendental movement to go beyond material. Like, we're going to unshackle ourselves. We're going to unburden ourselves from the burdens of the materialistic world, right? You hear that a lot, this materialism. They feel it's so evil that they somehow want to just get to a higher spiritual plane, whatever that means. But, you know, sorry, we live in a material world, as Madonna told us, and I'm a material boy, and I need stuff. I need material stuff. I need food,
we all
water, lots of beer. I need material stuff, man. And like, until you can eliminate that somehow with a magic wand, I would like that stuff to cost as little as possible.
And, you know, I've heard people like Tom Woods and others say this over and over, but it bears repeating. It is when you have your basic material needs met that you can focus on the more enlightened spiritual side of your existence.
Right.
How do people not understand that? Yeah.
All right. Well, that was an exciting chapter, man. I felt like it's almost
so like
there.
This book is great and people should study it.
God, our educational system is just whatever. All right, so now we're going to move on to chapter 5 of the second lesson. And this one is titled, "Who are the bosses in a free price system?" That's an interesting question. Who are the bosses? Who's in charge? All right. So the author here continues, Marx was right. Whoa! Wait a minute. Stop the presses, Adam. That's it. I'm converted. I'm a Marxist now. All right. Marx was right that profits drive down prices. He sure was. But don't average people, and especially the poor, benefit from these lower prices? Why then did Marx say that the profit system is run by the rich for the benefit of the rich? Wasn't he being inconsistent or at least confusing? If it is inconsistent to be or confusing, If it is inconsistent or confusing to hold that profits drive down prices, but nevertheless help the rich instead of the poor, why did history professor and contemporary Marxist Howard Zinn deepen the mystery further by arguing that, quote, the profit motive has distorted our whole economic and social system by making profit the key to what is produced, unquote. Economist Ludwig von Mises explains why Marx and Zinn are incorrect, why the free price and profit system especially benefits and, without government intervention to create and protect monopoly, is ultimately controlled by the many, not the few. Quote, mass production is the fundamental principle of profit-seeking industry. Big business, the target of the most fanatic attacks by the so-called leftists, produces for the masses, unquote. Economist Milton Friedman developed this idea further. Quote, progress over the past century has freed the masses from backbreaking toil and has made available to them products and services that were formerly the monopoly of the upper classes. The rich in ancient Greece would have welcomed the improvements in transportation and in medicine, but for the rest, the great achievements of profit-seeking have redounded primarily to the benefit of the ordinary person, unquote. Henry Hazlitt is even more specific. Quote, the overwhelming majority of Americans now enjoy the advantages of running water, central heating, telephones, automobiles, refrigerators, washing machines, electronic music, radios, television sets, amenities that millionaires and kings did not enjoy a few generations ago, unquote. All right. So, and one follow-up to that, we must, of course, now add air conditioning and computers, which in some form are owned by a majority of poor people in America. All right. I'll stop there, Adam. Any thoughts on all that?
Yeah, quite a few, but actually for this chapter, I think I would rather wait till the end for some
Okay.
commentary.
Yeah.
You go right ahead if.
Yeah. All right. A couple more pages here. We'll finish the thing up and we'll go ahead and give our commentary. What about today's luxury goods? They represent a much smaller part of the economy than production for the masses, but cannot be said to benefit the masses. Or do they? Dun, dun, dun. Many of today's luxury goods will become tomorrow's necessities for everyone. When luxuries first appear, they are almost always expensive. Only people with considerable means can afford them. But as production grows, costs fall, so that more and more people, and eventually most people, can afford them. This is how telephones, electricity, automobiles, and computers got their start as consumer items. If there had been no luxury buyers, such products would never have gotten a start, and no one would have them now. Von Mises offers an additional point. Average consumers not only benefit from a free price and profit system, they also largely control it. Quote, descriptive terms which people use are often quite misleading. In talking about modern captains of industry and leaders of big business, for instance, they call a man a chocolate king or a cotton king or an automobile king. Their use of such terminology implies that they see practically no difference between the modern heads of industry and those feudal kings, dukes, or lords of earlier days. But the difference is, in fact, very great, for a chocolate king does not rule at all, he serves. The king must stay in the good graces of his subjects. the consumers. The king must stay in the good graces of his subjects, the consumers. He loses his kingdom as soon as he is no longer in a position to give his customers better service and provide it at a lower cost than others with whom he must compete. Unquote. Yes, kings of old might incite a rebellion through weak or poor rule and might also face invasion from abroad. But the economic king is in a much more precarious position. Every day his subjects vote with their purchases, and therefore every day he must earn their vote anew. In this environment, it is possible, although very rare, to become rich in a short time. But it is easy to lose one's fortunes in a short time, especially if one has loans that cannot be repaid. The concept of consumer economic control was articulated in 1928 by The concept of consumer economic control was articulated in 1928 by British economist Edwin Kamen. Edwin Kamen, I think. He wrote that some tried to convince the wage earners that they are working not for the public and not for the consumers of the things or services which they produce, but for the capitalist employer. But this is just political propaganda. Beatrice Potter, a founder with her husband Sidney Webb of Fabian Socialism, disputed Kamen. Quote, in the business of my father, everybody had to obey the orders issued by my father, the boss. He alone had to give orders, but to him, nobody gave any orders, unquote. Ludwig von Mises, in turn, corrected Potter. This is a very short-sighted view. Orders were given to her father by the consumers, by the buyers. Unfortunately, Potter could not see those orders. As we shall see in subsequent chapters, producers often try to escape the sovereignty of the consumer and the accompanying discipline of market competition. They do this by creating monopolies and by other means, but they usually require the assistance of government to succeed for very long. When this happens, it is no longer a free price system, but a crony capitalist system. And that ends chapter 5 of lesson 2. All right, Adam. I can't hear you, sir. You are muted because those evil capitalists don't want you to speak. Free the people. Free
the people. Yeah, I love that chapter, man. That's why I didn't want to interrupt. Who are the bosses in a free price system? It's the consumers, obviously. Right. And another way of saying it is that maybe the boss is reality itself or a civil society. I mean, as he says at the very end there, absent some crony imposition of government force, businesses, workers, capital, they all serve their true master, which is consumers, who must also produce and serve others in order to consume. It's elegant, it's fair, it aligns incentives, it makes us a cooperative species rather than a combative one. And look at that example of the Chocolate King or whatever. And, you know, the one guy at the top, he just issues orders. He's some sort of dictator. Except what happens if he doesn't manage those resources and issue sensible orders and satisfy his customers and his employees and his suppliers and everyone else he has to interact with? What happens if he does that wrong? He loses his kingdom. He loses control of those resources. And who dethroned him? Not some rival monarch or the aristocracy. It's the lowly consumer who dethrones him. And that's just a beautiful system where the people who are in charge, you know, the powerful, the rich and powerful, they have to serve us all or they lose their kingdom. How can you imagine a better system than that?
Right. And what I always criticize Marxists for doing, what I perceive as an incorrect analysis, is they only ever consider the viewpoint of the laborer.
Right.
They look at it purely from a labor perspective. And the problem with that is not everyone is a laborer, but everyone is a consumer. Everyone's a consumer. The retired old lady to the young kid buying gumballs at the candy store, everyone's a consumer, not everyone's a laborer. So I think to me, the idea of fairness is policies, laws, regulations, the rules should apply to everyone equally.
Mhm.
So from my perspective, the way political laws should be made is just to ask the question, does this affect everyone equally at the same time? And so that's why certain laws only benefit one group, then we would say, nope, that can't be a law. And if you have that approach, you end up with the libertarian approach where you are actually reduced to basically nothing that the government can do. Again, for you and me as anarchists, we wouldn't go this, but I'm willing to go with the minarchist view. You end up with just sort of, a few very basic things: law, police, self-defense, military. These things apply to all people at all times equally, right? But then again, I say things like that, then I just get called names. I'm just a materialistic consumerist or something. I don't.
Yeah, talking about how socialists and Marxists tend to focus on the laborer. I mean, it is true that if the capitalist, the guy running the factory, the chocolate king, if he ignores the laborer, if he manages his employees tyrannically or brutally, he is going to lose employers and lose out in the market. I mean, you have to be a good steward of every resource at your disposal, which includes, the people who come in and work for you and the suppliers and everything. And also, in a free libertarian price system, you can't. I mean, as the great Gene Epstein said in that debate with Richard Wolff, um, you can organize your factory or your business in any way you want, right? You're free to do that, and if you want to eliminate all management and have nothing but labor, you can do that. You can eliminate the profit system. You can eliminate the ownership. You can have all the shares of the company being apportioned out to every worker perfectly. You can do that, and if you're right, and that's a smarter way to view things, well, then your socialist factory is going to do just fine. But I suspect that that in a free market, anyone who took Gene Epstein up on his recommendation and organized their factory that way would find themselves quickly out of business because they would be not having a balanced approach to the situation.
All right, well said, sir. Completely agree with that. All right, so let's wrap up our part 2 of lesson 2 episode here with chapter 6, again, of the book Economics in 3 Lessons by Hunter Lewis. And chapter 6 is titled Spontaneous Order from Free Prices. Interesting. We talk a lot about spontaneous order in libertarian philosophy, so let's hear it from an economic point of view here. In a genuine free price system, which governments historically have never allowed, consumers as a whole would lead the economy. No one person or elite would have much say about the direction we take. Some people find this idea disturbing. Would it not lead to chaos? Can any system thrive which is unguided, rudderless, subject to no visible commands? Would this not lead to trouble? The answer is quite simple: no. All right.
All right.
That's it. End of chapter, buddy. All right. A system led by consumers will produce by far the best outcome for consumers. Whom should an economy serve if not consumers? As we have noted, all workers are consumers, although not all consumers are workers. Is there an echo in here?
Hello.
Our economic system should not revolve around the supposed needs of workers and certainly not around the supposed needs of business owners, but rather around the needs of consumers, and then everyone, workers and business owners included, will benefit. A system led by consumers is an example of what Michael Polanyi called spontaneous order. Some of our most important and reliable human systems work this way. Everything works admirably with no commands from any government guiding authority. In the case of religion, the U.S. Constitution forbids government direction or control. This was a major departure from historical precedent, since previously government and religion had almost always been combined in some way in human societies, and most people would agree it was a necessary and fruitful reform. But there is much more in our society that is not directed in any way by government. For example, who directs human language? The French Academy has attempted to direct how people speak French, but no one pays much attention. Our common law has accumulated over the centuries in a similar way, unguided by any central government authority. If we do not need government controlling our religion, our language, or the evolution of our common law, why do we need government controlling our economic price system? Social philosopher Walter Lippmann wrote of the uncoordinated, unplanned, disorderly individualism of a free market economy, but he was wrong about it being unplanned. As economist Frederick Hayek explained, quote, "This is not a dispute about whether planning is to be done or not. It is a dispute as to whether planning is to be done centrally by one authority for the whole economic system or is to be divided among many individuals," unquote. Dividing economic leadership among billions of people creates a much more reliable and ordered system than any form of central control. It is also the only possible safeguard against monopoly, because in a centralized, government controlled system, economic predators need only make a deal with the government to create an unassailable monopoly. Dividing economic leadership among billions of people creates a much more reliable and ordered system than any form of central control. It is also the only possible safeguard against monopoly, because in a centralized, government controlled system, economic predators need only make a deal with the government to create an unassailable monopoly. Thoughts?
Yeah, word. Amen.
Word.
Um,
Words are
there's,
hard.
I love the examples he gave of leaderless spontaneous order, but there's more. Language, he said, but there's math, there's physics, music, art. Um, there's really no reason that production of goods and services and the generation of prices should be any different. All these things can be order created spontaneously from the bottom up rather than the top down. You get beautiful, rational, peaceful order when it comes from the bottom up instead of from dear leader or some oligarch. And as Friedrich Hayek stressed, the argument isn't about whether society needs to plan or not. It's about who does the planning. So, do you want a central authority making these plans? You know, the famous 5-year plans of the Soviet Union, or do you want planning dispersed among a vast array of free people with their private property and free association, free exchange? The answer is obvious. The former central plan is chaos, and the latter is what is orderly. The former leads to cronyism, all the evils you see on K Street and Capitol Hill, um, begging the government for some sort of monopoly provision or restriction or regulation. And the latter, bottom up, where everybody gets a chance to plan without any monopoly control, that's what leads to prosperity and freedom. And it's the fact that we have any semblance of that at all. Um, it's the reason we have what the the prosperity we've achieved over the last 200 or 300 years is a result of the sliver of that that's been allowed to be exercised. And if we could unleash it all, it wouldn't be utopia, but we'd have our flying cars. I guarantee you that.
Example I always like to use, because I feel like it's just maybe a light bulb, or it's so obvious once you see it this way, is to describe sort of spontaneous order and why you don't need sort of all these government rules and regulations, is to use games as an example. There's no U.S. Department of Chess,
Right.
except somehow people around the world, millions of people, all the time, everywhere, play chess by the same rules. How is that possible?
Except for my 6-year-old nephew. That guy thinks the horse moves in a whole bunch of ways it just
Right,
doesn't, and I
right,
think we should call the cops on him.
right, right. Absolutely. There ought to be a Department of Chess, DOC. I mean, let's go.
The DOC.
It can be Department of Corrections and Chess. I mean, whatever. All right, let's finish this chapter up. It is often argued that the defect of a free price system is that it will, over time, fall into the hands of a few predatory business concerns. But when we look closely at economic history, this is almost impossible to do without government collusion. It is government that holds the power to fine, jail, or kill. It is government which can bankrupt through prolonged legal proceedings. Without these powers protecting them, would-be monopolists have little chance of destroying all competition. Putting the economy into billions of hands rather than into the hands of a few government leaders is also a safer approach. There is no way to avoid economic mistakes. But if decisions are made by individual producers and consumers, they will be made on a small scale and therefore easily corrected, unlike the often catastrophic mistakes of central planners. The failure of the communist planners is a warning. So is President Franklin Roosevelt's failure to end the Great Depression. So is the crash of 2008, primarily caused by U.S. Federal Reserve and other central bank errors, which we will explore further in this book. Adam Smith explained this basic point in 1776. Quote, "The statesman who would attempt to direct private people in what manner they ought to employ their capitals would not only load himself with the most unnecessary attention, but assume an authority which could safely be trusted not only to no single person, but to no council or senate whatever, and which would nowhere be so dangerous as in the hands of a man who had folly and presumption enough to fancy himself fit to exercise it," unquote. Kind of harkens to the famous quote. What was it, Einstein that said, the best people to be politicians never want to do it. I can't. You know what
I love that
I'm referring to? Yeah.
The quote about the guy who said the thing. I love that one. Yeah, I do know the one you're talking about, but I also cannot reproduce it. So instead, I'm going to make fun of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to go back real quick and reread the quote that the author puts in at the very beginning of the book, because this to me is really why I'm a libertarian, not an evil, cold-blooded, non-caring capitalist, right? It's because of this quote from Michael Novak that's at the beginning of the book. "The suffering of poverty is unnecessary because over the centuries, a market system has been worked out to create the wealth of nations, all nations. To bring that system to all the world's poor is our chief unfinished business." I'm not here to defend the rich or to make sure they get fat profits. I want everyone in the world to be wealthy, healthy, and wise. And I believe that, the libertarian philosophy is the way to go. So anyway, Adam, what are some final thoughts you had on chapter 6 or any of all of this part of lesson 2 that we covered?
Oh, I'll just piggyback on the point you were just making, which is I think the ideal system you would want for our species on this planet economically is that the incentives are aligned in such a way that all the genius of our people is bent to the task of using our scarce resources to feed and clothe and make prosperous and elevate the material needs and therefore the spiritual needs of all the people on this planet. And the free price system does that. And anybody who comes along as some sort of a power mad wannabe tyrant and says, nah, I'm going to pick up a gun and I think I can make it better. You are hubristic and a dangerous fellow. Trust in freedom. It is what elevates us as a species. And hopefully, as we go through this book and comment on it, more people will see that truth.
All right, great. Well, folks, thanks for joining us here for this continuing series that we're doing on economics and economic education. Be sure to follow us. Click that subscribe button. Check out our Substack at hamannature.com, hamannature.substack.com. Subscribe to the newsletters. And we appreciate your support. We will catch you next time on
Haman Nature.